Hello and welcome to this short presentation, Catch of the Day, Emotet, from initial access all the way to disinfection. What is Emotet? Well, Emo, of course, is a punk rock band. This is not that. And King Tut, of course, is an Egyptian pharaoh. This is not that either. Emotet is pervasive malware that began life in 2014. So it's gone through a number of revisions. And originally, it was a banking Trojan. It has worm-like capabilities and tried to steal credentials so that it could defraud banks, and primarily targeted initially German and Austrian banks, later on Swiss banks. This is an attempt to be stealthy and not attack the really big boys. It evolved significantly from 2016 and 17 onwards. And by version 3, it had added the ability to install other malware. If you're familiar with things like TrickBot, which are quite pervasive, and Ryuk, in fact, it was successful to the tune of $460,000 of ransom at Lake City, Florida. And then the city of Allentown finally had to get Microsoft to recover. And this supposedly cost the city upwards of $1 million. So it was very successful as malware. These days, Emotet is targeting everybody. This isn't just about banking. It isn't just about stealing that Bitcoin wallet. But if you're an individual or a company or a government entity, Emotet is after you. How does Emotet work? Well, the initial access is via spear phishing. They send very persuasive emails. Originally, it used to be goofy stuff like bank remittance advice and your Amazon.com delivery is delayed. They also evolved to take advantage of the fears around COVID-19. Initially JavaScript, but later on an infected Word document, as we'll see in a demonstration. But spear phishing, very persuasive. If you're in Minnesota, they might send you email that says snow policy just about the time when you're expecting a snowstorm. So tricky indeed. If it does manage to get installed on your endpoint and evades whatever endpoint protection you have, then it will try its best to ransack your contact list and mail itself to all of your contacts. This is likely to engender trust. After all, you're a known person to them, and they're more likely to do, the silly thing, which is double click the attachment. If it happens to be on a company network, why then it will scan that network and try its best to do brute force password guessing. So if you've got something silly by way of a password and or haven't enabled MFA internally, this thing's going to spread laterally very quickly indeed. It's got some neat techniques to avoid detection. It detects if it's running in a sandbox or not on a virtual machine. So if you have something like Microsoft Defender and it sees this executable, it might pause in order to move that executable up to a sandbox in Azure and detonate it there. Well, Emotet will detect that it's in a sandbox and refuse to deploy, thereby hoping to fool the endpoint protection solution. Also, it's continually upgrading itself just like any other piece of software on your computer. And so if it can contact the command and control servers, why then it might update itself and keep itself up to date and evasive. It's also polymorphic, another attempt to avoid detection, especially by legacy antivirus that depends upon signature. So every time it runs, it's got a new signature, thereby hoping to avoid detection. Well, today it's no longer a banking Trojan, but it's become malware as a service. Rather than being a means to an end, it will actually be used in order to distribute malware from somebody else. And so you'll see Emotet endpoints that are infected be up for auction because they're a vessel for other kinds of malware. There was a concerted attempt in January of 2021, an announcement from Europol that they had busted the infrastructure, that they found hundreds of servers spread globally in this criminal enterprise. They were there for different functions. They were there to provide resiliency. They were there to be nearby, their victims. And so there was a big time takedown in Jan of 2021. This gang, by the way, is based in the Ukraine, so its activities after the Russian invasion is still unclear. But by November of 2021, it was noticed by Trend Micro that infected machines that already had TrickBot were somehow downloading and updating Emotet binaries. CISA has called this, the most significant malware. And so this is something to be aware of as a potential thing that affects you. What's the infection chain like? Like we said, it's spear phishing. You'll see that irresistible lure of an email. And if you are tricked into opening the attachment, why then you'll see macros running, you'll see downloads of Emotet malware, and then the gathered information sent off to the CNC server of the attacker. This is what allows them then to maybe use you as a victim and then sell your information to other malware as a service folks. Here are some details on the internal working of Emotet. Notice that it will spread itself via DLLs, therefore try to be pervasive. If it does gather the operating system information, it will send these off to the CNC server so that you can be auctioned off as a victim. And it's also pervasive in terms of creating an auto start registry so that even if you reboot, it's back in operation again. So Emotet detection in real life. One of our customers, NetSurian's managed OpenXDR customers, is an MSP who in turn had a healthcare customer that had endpoint with up-to-date but legacy antivirus, got infected by Emotet. And the question really is, how did we catch it? So let me show you what happened in this particular customer's situation. So when the infection began, user John Doe received the spear phishing attachment, Word document. And of course, it was infected, was tricked into opening it, which launched PowerShell as we've described before. This caused an exe to be run. Notice the funny file name. This is high entropy. This is a file that's probably created by a program, not by a human. And it was put in the program data pipe. Well, this didn't get very far because the up-to-date antivirus looked at it and said, you're not going anywhere, and squashed it. But of course, the problem didn't end there. PowerShell ran. And this is not something that antivirus is equipped to actually block. And so PowerShell dropped a file called 379.exe in the temp folder. Didn't do anything with it, didn't run it, but instead made a clone of it and called it defineguids.exe, which is, of course, a well-known program inside the Microsoft domain. But this version of define GUIDs was in app data local, not in the traditional place where Microsoft puts it. So how did we catch it? Well, what the SOC detected was that there was a first time seen MD5 hash. This is 379.exe. Obviously, it was allowed by the legacy antivirus, but it connected to that command and control server, which we knew was a bad IP. And so that's what raised hackles. We were able to escalate to the MSP with all of the details needed for disinfection. We then promptly added that hash to the unsafe list so that if this hash had propagated laterally, it wasn't going to go anywhere, even given that the legacy antivirus was allowing it. The MSP got time to quarantine and reimage the infected machines and go back and explain to the user just exactly how he had been compromised. So how can you protect against Emotet? At an organizational level, of course, web content filters, attachment inspection, quarantining it, and then headers to warn the user that this is an external email. Be very careful of what you click. At a user level, cyber security training, maybe mock phishing campaigns to find out who are the people that get taken, and then give them an extra level of education. Upgrade. Don't do traditional antivirus signature based. Go to next gen EDR, like maybe NetSurian's endpoint protection service. And then last, but certainly not the least, assume breach. You could do all of these things to protect yourself, but the fact of the matter is perfect protection is not practical. So assume that you will be breached and think about XDR for detection and response exactly the way that you saw it operate today. Thank you for your attention.